this is my past IBM UX design challenge. Now, if you go throughout the entire process, you can see my interview on that process up here above. You will pass on to the second and final round of the interview, that being this design challenge. It can vary year by year. However, I did see some other examples online when I was doing mine, and to fully disclose, this is not an NDA project, NDA standing for non-disclosure agreement, and there are other examples you can reference online. I for sure know that I did when I was doing mine. However, if you're anything like me, you like to learn visually, so I hope this video would be more useful if you prefer someone to talk through their design thinking process. So to quickly reiterate what the point of a design challenge is, a design challenge is a really quick project brief that you are given, and the point of it is to see how you think as a designer within a small period of time. There is not a lot of flexibility to create this fully built out iteration, but it's more how you think on the spot in a way to make sure that your design sensibilities and practices are on par. Plus, overall, looking back at this design challenge, I'm just really thankful for the design thinking skills I was able to create over specifically my bootcamp springboard. So this is not a sponsored video. I just happened to take this bootcamp through doing a lot of research on it, and I felt it really matched me. I got a really great results. That's why I got these offers from IBM and Amazon. So if you were looking into bootcamps as well and felt springboard was a good fit for you, feel free to use my code Sharon Kim to get $1,000 off your UX design tuition, and I will also leave the link in the description box down below. So without further ado, I'm going to hop onto my FIGMA file and have you see how I approach this design challenge. So let's jump straight into the video. Alright, so here's my FIGMA file in my IBM design challenge. So I've done pretty much everything within FIGMA. I've organized it, taken notes on here, and yeah, pretty much just like did everything within this file. So as a cover, I just put down like what they put as a email sort of presentation towards me of like the directions or instructions of what to do. And now overall, I'll give like a really quick click through of everything that I've done. So there were 3 steps to this. First is a heuristic evaluation. I decided to create 1 page for that. Steps 2 and 3 was, let me remind myself, of creating a mock-up of how to find and book a car, and step 3 of creating a research agenda. And I put those 2 together on a separate FIGMA file here. Lastly, I put it all together within a presentation deck, as you can see here. So with that said, let's go back to the beginning of step 1 and overall giving this entire IBM design challenge. So first off, when I realized I was passed from my portfolio presentation now onto the design challenge, they gave me this email listing some instructions of this design challenge of what to do. It gave me a few tasks to complete. First being this heuristic review of this website called Hertz.com. And Hertz is essentially like this car rental website. It's the first time I've ever heard of it, and they were asking me to perform a heuristic evaluation on that. So first step, heuristic evaluation. Here is everything. And overall what I've done was I went through the Hertz website. I just went to like Hertz.com, and I would take screenshots of every single page, acting as if I was the user first time like logging onto this website. And not only that, when I was doing this, as you can see here, I would pull up like my Apple Notes and just make a lot of notes of anything I noticed, you know, first impressions on the right hand side while I was clicking. And I did this because if I were to click through it a few times and went back, maybe I would forget a first impression that I had. Maybe I would forget a small friction point or a pain point that I went through when going throughout this flow. And for example, I noticed with Hertz website, when you are trying to click through and compare cars of which ones you want to go through, I would see here like all these reviews, and I'm just really curious like what these reviews would be saying, and I think it would give you a more in-depth look of why this car versus that car got this type of review. Not only that, they would give scores and ratings and all, but then again, how can I feel more comfortable that this car is justified by that? What have other people have been saying? Not only this, but I found that having this kind of like clunky car, but card design of only having 2 things taking up most of this screen was a little not ideal in my sense. I also like there was no option to possibly heart certain vehicles. Maybe I want to go back to it later and not have to scroll back and forth from top to bottom to see which car I was most into. So things like that, taking note of anything that I noticed when going throughout this entire process, and I put it all into Apple Notes. Additionally, I listed the mental model of even beyond going into the design, like kind of the mindset of who the user was, even keeping in mind like, yeah, you're doing a heuristic evaluation, but who is ultimately using this website, and also trying to keep it in mind of their point of reference. This is someone who doesn't really go, like to rent a car really often, so it's not like a habitual thing they're used to, such as using Instagram or Facebook. So they probably need a lot more guidance step by step on where they are and what to do. And I noted that as a mental model. They probably don't do this often. They're most likely planning ahead since it's occasional, and they want to be extra careful with their decisions. I'm going to drive this car. It's a limited thing. I'm putting extra resources towards it. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision. Then with that, I would take all the notes and I typed it up into here first, a Google Doc, and I used a rating scale of 1 to 4, first being like a more cosmetic problem and 4 being a really imperative usability problem that must be fixed. And how I got to this point was, before the challenge and taking a step back of usability heuristics, I needed a refresher on it. I just Googled like how to conduct a heuristic evaluation. I've seen some people use this kind of rating scale to do that, so that's what I decided to do as well. So I listed everything there, from breaking it down from the home page to the results page, giving like a summary on the top, and I would highlight specific things that I want to focus on later on in my design. This is to, in a way, help you better design step 2 of this challenge, that being like to redesign this experience. And then finally, once I've done like the more thinking work of it, thinking ahead to the presentation part, I would remodel it again into this nicer frame sort of model, and knowing how I would speak through things, I broke it down into like the major sections of that website, breaking it down of what I would do differently and what I would change. Things from like, listing out the specific heuristic evaluation, the heuristic problem, and then what I would do instead. Continue doing that throughout the vehicles page, the extras page, preferring recognition versus recall instead of them having to think about it to themselves. What did I choose before in the previous page? And continuously through the checkout page as well. So overall, that was step 1. I think this part took a solid, well, if I were to omit my own like refresher on what heuristics were and like reminding myself on that, this probably took a solid like 2.5 hours to do. And in my opinion, I feel if you do this heuristic evaluation well, then moving on to steps 2 and 3 become like a breeze. So step 2, as you can see here, is now create several key screen mock-ups for the task of finding and booking a car on that website. And that's what I went on to doing into the second page. Here's my IBM water bottle, by the way. Again, I always like to remind myself, so organization-wise, I'd always like re-paste the task with the screenshot in there. And I would first list out to myself before even approaching this project, I want to list out all the process steps that I want to make sure that I hit. And I would take that first process step, break it down into that first step, and then just transfer step 2, step 3, step 4 accordingly here. So first, when approaching this redesign I first want to like address any assumptions that I may have, and I made some assumptions like the user is proficient in web applications. However, they're a first-time user using Hertz services, rental sites. They're not like an expert driver. They may not have many experiences with a variety of cars, and I assume that they're ready to book today within the US. And I found that having these constraints were helpful, because if you don't have those constraints, there's like a little bit too many factors later on of where this design could go. So it's going to help narrow down your design in a more efficient manner. Next, similarly as what I've done with step 1 with the heuristic evaluation, is laying out the general skeleton, let me do this, of this flow of the Hertz website. First being the basic info page, what do I currently see, what would I prefer instead. For example, in this beginning portion, I think it'd be nice for options of the type of vehicle they're already looking for, although it's not necessary since they're inputting data sort of mindset. They're already inputting like when they want to put it in, like where they want to go, and if they have an option of or idea of what kind of car they're looking for, I think that might be helpful. And moving on, same thing for the choosing vehicle. I thought there's a really good use of the status bar. However, I felt it'd be nice to compare more options instead of scrolling back and forth of top to bottom. Maybe I like, option number 2 from the top, but then there was also option number 8 from the bottom. And how can I, compare them more easily instead of going back and forth? Continuing on to the add-ons page, love the status bar, but I felt like they could further clarify what they mean by most popular, some information about how many more people have used it, what are the reviews like, things of that nature. And last being the checkout page, where you do have all these details. However, I would separate this section of wanting to upgrade to this car, as there's like little distinction between the top and bottom, and I feel that there is more room for error of them like accidentally wanting to upgrade when they did it. And lastly, still looking at it in a bird's eye view, I conducted a competitive analysis of other websites that are out there related to Hertz, and I found this like screenshot of other like car rental companies, and I would also map out their flows as well. Same thing with step 2 that I've done, but with the other pages as well. And I felt that what was most different, they have their basic information page, was the choosing vehicle class. So which would be the best structure of, laying out the information for these types of vehicles. And then after having an idea of not only what is Hertz currently doing, but also what are their competitors doing, and having notes on that, I created some brainstorm and sketches on some A4 paper. And when doing this, I asked myself a lot of questions of, if I was a driver, what kind of questions would I ask and what kind of answers would I be looking for? For example, how much gas am I going to use? Does the car eat a lot of gas? How many miles am I driving? How comfortable are the seats maybe? What cars are most popular in general? What's the most bang for your buck per se? And I would take all these questions in mind when creating my first list of sketches. And as you can see, this kind of looks like chicken scratch, but that's okay. That's not really the point. The point is more really just getting your thoughts down on paper so you don't forget them, and continuing to iterate of, I like how this is laid out, but what if instead of a card design, I put it into more of a more vertical stacked layer design? And when I was doing this, I also kept in mind of all the heuristics, wanting to clarify the status bar on top, perhaps having more filters or options, having a favorites option as well. And asking myself all those questions helped to formulate and develop my sketches later on down the line. Finally, for my redesign, I took all of those notes from my sketches and I went straight into hi-fi. So I had like the original Hertz homepage here as I outlined it in red, and I put my redesign directly next to it. And the biggest one here was, I feel like there's just a lot of information here, and I felt that it would be more effective to have progressive disclosure. First being like, where are you going to pick this up? Like, which airport are you going to be at? What time? And then once you click that, then immediately it would relay more information towards you of what information to put in. Additionally, here for my redesign, when actually selecting the vehicle, I do still have the option of having the rating on it, but also having the option of seeing how many reviews there are. And if you click on using the affordability of having the underline, you can see what other people have been saying. Plus, maybe not everyone knows what MPG is, so I put a little eye icon there, a little toggle of what's included, and some extra details instead of you having to actually click into the card and it opening up into a new page, which doesn't seem as flexible. And additionally, there is an option of either paying now or paying later, and I put both options next to each other as well, or on top or bottom of each other. And I felt that was better because over here, it only gave you an option of pay later, and there's no option to pay now, which I thought was weird. So this gives flexibility to do both. And lastly, when going throughout this entire process, I always added a go back to step 1 to pick up or drop off, or to go to the next step, as in continue. Yeah, so I would continue to flesh out in this step 2 to 3 page, and I would also do that within my research plan, what I do differently. I would think about all the questions that I had when doing this design and how I would like to further explore or validate my assumptions or prove any design assumptions that I have going on. So not only having a research plan answering the question, but also having some thoughts of reflection. What would you do differently? If you had more time, what would you do? And having all those listed out would be a major plus in my opinion when doing this challenge. Some thoughts I had with this was, overall the biggest limitation was time. They're giving me 4 to 6 hours to do this design project. but it did have me really think about which actions would give me the most mileage for my time and my design time. Same thing with the research plan, like what specific features would I test out? I would test out what would go in the filter bar, maybe do A/B testing on the vehicle layout, maybe instead of it being like this card sort of layout, would be more of this vertical stack. Which one would be better? Do A/B testing on that. Hi-Fi, although it makes it look more polished, it does take the most time. Just a note I wrote here. And if I had more time, I would expand on creating more on the reviews page, the location page, but they weren't essential to this project, hence I omitted it. Just even decisions like that, it would be nice to click on the reviews section that I would write down here. If you click on this, it would lead to that, but that's not really integral to answering the question, hence you skip it. You gotta be, so trying to allocate which decisions are the best use of your time is what I'd suggest as well. Lastly, after doing this entire redesign and research portion and answering every single question that they were asking me to, I would always refer back to the screenshots and make sure that I was not missing anything. And then finally, for presentation-wise and aesthetic purposes, I recopied some screens that I already designed in steps 1 and 2 pages here, and I put it all together in a really quick presentation deck. And I did this entire thing within like 30 minutes before I had to present. So going through that really quickly, I'll show you here. Yeah, even prototype mode, since everything was already in Figma, I thought this would be most efficient. When it was time to actually present, I made a really simple, quick intro cover. Doesn't have to be like greatly designed or so perfectly designed, just like get the basic information out, make it clean. And I did an overview of what I've done. First part, heuristic analysis, talking through the main points that you found throughout that. This being first, consistency and standards. If I select a different drop-off location, it should be next to the drop-off date. For example, if here, you can't, it's a little hard to see it, but this is a drop-off pickup location and drop-off location, but I feel like the drop-off location should be next to the drop-off date here instead of like separating that. I felt like that didn't make sense. Also, to stick to error prevention, I believe that you should not be able to click the drop-off time at all if the location is not available. However, that was the case with the current Hertz website. Next being the vehicles page, and I continue to list all this out. If you guys want, I am listing out this full Figma file into the description box down below, so you can read this to yourself. Better understanding the research and who this was for. I made a really quick persona on that. Mapping out the current user flow, just like documenting everything that you already done, but then just presenting it in a more cleaner way. Competitive analysis, brainstorm sketches, and then moving on to redesign, first being the progressive disclosure. You first click on one, and then it would disclose more information for you to fill out. Secondly is selecting a vehicle, moving from this card design to a more vertical stack design with both pay later, pay now option, a toggle of what's included with more details, as well as an option to see more reviews. I also did change the status bar in a way where I had added a modify button here, as that option here, modify, was not really visible and hard to see. Also adding the pickup drop-off button as well as a continue button. I remember here I actually didn't fully get the presentation together, so this screen is not showing up, but like presented it like this. For the adding extras page, I put it in a more list view, as you see on the right hand side, with a more descriptive title instead of like skip the pump and save time. And I also put the price included in the button here instead of having them separated. Finally, for the review and book, this is what it currently looks like, and what I've done instead was I put the visual on the car that the user has selected on top with the summary, an easy price breakdown in USD, as you can see here. I also put that option to upgrade, and I redesigned it to separate that and put that on the bottom. And because of that, I put the actual selected car on a more lighter gray background to create that differentiation, so there's no confusion on that. Finally, moving on to part 3 of the research plan. I'll read it off to you. Overall, the biggest limitation was indeed time, and I really did have to think about which moves and actions would most efficiently carry me towards my goal. I would love to have more interviews with actual mid-career professionals to gain more context towards the situation and where they would maybe be traveling instead of assuming, as that can really change the design. And more specifically, if I had more time, I would love to explore more what goes in the filter bar by conducting user interviews, see what factors do users most care about within this filtering system. Plus, do A/B testing of the vehicle layout, maybe it's a card versus a vertical stack, to see which one they prefer. And finally, if I did have more time, I would like to expand more on creating the reviews page, the location page if you clicked out on it, but it wasn't essential and wasn't the most efficient use of my time for this challenge. So then after this presentation, I think what really tied it together and they really liked was I have everything in one Figma file, but then I also created a quick prototype of the click-through prototype within the file as well. So I put that within here of steps 2 and 3, flow 1, and I would share there. And while sharing my screen, I would click through my prototype here, continue. You see all like the modify buttons. This one's, you can modify that too, so you can click on that, pay now or pay later. You could go back or continue. And this is the final page. You can go back and modify everything. You see the reviews there and a more clear differentiation of what you chose versus if you do want to upgrade on the bottom left-hand side. Reserve, and that was it for my design challenge. Something I really do want to note is some of the questions that they asked me, and a question I really think stood out was when one of the interviewers asked me, for example, going back to the Figma file, that section where in the checkout page, like these two, this is what it currently looks like right now on the Hertz website, where this is like the actual car that the user would select. However, this medium sedan upgrade portion is on the bottom. I argued that it was confusing. I don't know which car I actually selected. However, the interviewer challenged me with this question. It's mentioned that this was designed like this on purpose for them to accidentally, perhaps, to upgrade it on purpose and to give Hertz more profit in terms of more upgrades, right? So he would ask me, then you, Sharon, as a designer, how would you defend your decision for your design where that distinction is clearer? And what I said was, although I understand that as a company, revenue and profit is very important, at the same time, in the user's perspective, if they feel tricked or if they feel in a way tricked of creating a decision that they did not mean to create, it's actually going to create a worse reputation for Hertz as a brand. And I wonder if the brand of Hertz as a reliable company is less valuable than them getting an extra few dollars from someone accidentally getting an upgrade for a poorly designed website. So that's what I said in response, and he seemed really impressed with that response, trying to defend that although profit's good and yeah, you could objectively have more revenue from people accidentally clicking this, upgraded car. Thinking more long-term of the company as a brand, this, although short-term it's going to give you more profit, long-term it doesn't reflect greatly on the brand and it can do long-term damage of ruining their reputation as a good, reliable brand. Now, going back, some tips I have when approaching this design challenge, or honestly any other design challenge, is first to go a little bit beyond the allotted time given. And what I mean by that is, for example, for this project, they were saying don't spend more than like 4 to 6 hours on it. However, I spent like 8 to 9 hours on this project, and the reason why that is because I feel like if you and like other people are all doing the same challenge, I feel like then at that point it's about who kind of went above and beyond, who went did the extra few hours to put into a project. If they say 4 to 6 hours on a challenge, but you spend like 20 hours on it, then that's a different story. But I think having that little extra nudge to show that you put in that much more attention to detail and also allows you to create more beautiful high fidelity wireframes is a major benefit, and I think it's absolutely worth it. So all this to say, do a little bit extra in your design challenge. Also, I will note what was mentioned to me when I was presenting my challenge was they really liked how I did everything in Figma. So Figma is like a super popular tool right now. I don't think a lot of companies are using Sketch. I know even Google and Facebook, they use Figma too. And I remember they were noting to me that they loved how I did everything on Figma. I created the project brief and like my notes in Figma. I did the presentation in Figma. I had my research in Figma, all organized into files. So that's something they noted, and I feel like you should know that as well. So overall, yes, that was my design challenge. I hope it was useful for you. Otherwise, do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll put the link to my LinkedIn down in the description box down below, and I'm going to be really open and transparent about it. I will link the full Figma file to my IBM design challenge in the description box down below, and I might even put it on my website depending on how I'm feeling after I create this. But anyway, you'll find all the information, including the full Figma link, in the description box. So otherwise, feel free to let me know any other comments or clarifying questions you might have, any video suggestions. So I'm looking forward to talking with you down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.